break the rules.
To become a hero. I do it and I become the enemy. That doesn't seem fair.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Art Box. Today is a painting video where I attempted to do the Scarlet Witch from the Multiverse of Madness. And when I mean attempted is I gave it a good shot, but I don't think it turned out that well. I tried. The vision that I had in my head is not quite exactly what came out on the glass. So yes, today is a glass painting. I'm attempting to do some more of these reverse style glass paintings, and let me just show you how I went. So first off, I started out with this lovely picture of the Scarlet Witch and a sheet of glass because, you know, we're doing a glass painting. Next, we're gonna need some paints. I'm using the acrylics. I mentioned this once before. The Fine Touch, Master's Touch, as well as the Apple Barrel is probably some of the best brands you can use for these glass paintings. And lastly, we're going to need some of these Sharpie oil-based pens. These are the ones I highly recommend if you guys are thinking about buying any pens. Get you a pack of these. Link will be in the bio in case you can't find any at your local hobby shop. To make sure the glass isn't sliding all around the paper and distorting my lines, I went ahead and used some of this blue painter's tape just to secure the paper to the glass. This image has a lot of fine lines and details, so I'm going to start with the extra fine tip Sharpie marker to do these outlines. Now, as you can see from the printout, the details of the crown came out a lot darker than I would like them to do, so be sure you check your contrast and brightness before you print it out. I normally adjust all this in Canva, as well as you can also do this in Photoshop. Now, don't roast me too hard. I know some of these lines are very shaky and wiggly, but I'm holding the camera with one hand and trying to trace with the other. I really should get a tripod to do this. I just looked at the reference photo that I had on my computer and did my best to put in the details that I saw on Scarlet Witch's crown. So when it comes to the outline, kind of self-explanatory, you want to get all of the details that you can see from the printout that you use. But I'm learning as I'm doing this, you also want to use your artistic eye and take some artistic freedom to add in some of the things you don't see. Because around the neck area, you can see there's no real distinction of where her hair ends and where her neck begins. And sometimes copying things just as you see on the glass isn't always the best option. You'll be able to tell later on as I try to color in the pupil of her eyes, they're going to look a little weird when everything's done. So since you are an artist, do your best to use those skills that you've learned on other paintings to make these glass paintings look more real. While I finish outlining this, let's have a quick little nerd break. Multiverse of Madness was such a good movie. I was very excited to the whole lead up to this film. I know some people kind of split down the middle as to whether they liked it or hated it. I think most people that didn't like it had very high expectations of a lot of cameos to show up in this movie that didn't. I honestly did not want it to be just a cameo movie. I'm glad toward the very end of it, they brought it back down to a Doctor Strange film, because ultimately that's what this was supposed to be. I think all those other characters that people were wanting to see will show up eventually in a lot of other movies, because as we know, the MCU is not done with the multiverse. Now that all the outlining is done, which looking back on this was the easy part, it's time to move on to what's normally my favorite part, the painting, which is where all the problems started. Now remember, when doing these reverse style glass paintings, you want to put your highlights on first, then any lighter tones that you have followed by your shadows, and lastly you want to do your overall fill of color. For some reason I am obsessed with these strong white highlights, so that's what I started with, and I knew I want certain angles of the crown to be hit with light, so I mixed some white as well as some red together to get this lighter pink shade, and I used that to do the highlights of the crown. Ultimately, the highlights of the crown was the only thing I wanted to have a pop of color. Everything else I wanted to kind of do in a grayscale, but as you'll soon see, things change. I'm still learning techniques and best practices on coloring these glass paintings. For one, I might have to get brushes that have thicker bristles so I can actually hold more paint, because when you're filling in these glass paintings, you want to dab the color down. You don't want to do traditional brush strokes, at least not in the beginning when you're laying your initial color down. And as anyone will tell you who does these types of paintings, let one layer dry before you move on to the next. The premise behind glass painting is very simple when you really think about it, because as you can see here, I'm just putting shadows over where shadows lay, like on her cheekbones and around her neck, and I wanted her to be surrounded by her chaos energy, so I wanted the highlights in her hair also to reflect the magical light powers or sources that's around her. So that's why I started painting this with that red as well as that shade of pink that I created earlier. And as messy as this looked from this side, I actually thought it was turning out well. And with that notion, the only thing left to do was just to put in the main filler color, which was going to be the white, as I wanted the skin tone of this to be a kind of monochromatic grayscale. But let me tell you, when I flipped this over, it was not exactly what I was envisioning. So I figured I'll go back with some red to kind of highlight certain areas like under the jawline as well as around the face, just to try to give it a little bit more dimension because it was not looking good at all. Here you can see me holding it up to the light, just trying to bring out some of the details that I mentioned. Even in some cases, moving the colors around because they were still wet and I can still manipulate them. But any artist tells you at some point you just gotta know when to call it quits and accept what you've made is just what you made. So here's the part you guys been waiting for, the flip. Here is the Scarlet Witch. Let me know what you guys think of this new glass painting.
I'm not a witch. I don't cast spells. No one taught me magic.
I mean, quite honestly, I can't say I absolutely hate it. I mean, I don't love it. It can definitely be a lot better, and there's definitely room for improvement, and that can be said with anything. The look I was hoping to go for was more of a realistic grayscale in the face, and having her hair and the crown be the pop of color as the highlight features, but you can see that didn't happen. So to save it, if you will, I went with this kind of energy-based, chaos, abstract look. I think it actually worked, because God knows this was not what I was originally envisioning. I find that to be artist's #1 trick. If something doesn't work out, just make it abstract. I do want to get better at these types of paintings, and it's only going to come with practice, and I don't mind sharing some of the mistakes that I make along the way with you guys. The one thing I have learned about doing the reverse style paintings is you definitely are going to need a lot of patience, which is sometimes the thing I don't have. I'm so desperate to see the end of a project that I can probably rush through it, and that's never going to be a good thing when it comes to doing these types of paintings. Take your time. So don't be surprised if you see me scrape this off and just start again and post my second attempt somewhere on one of my social media platforms. By the way, all of those are linked down in the description box below, so feel free to follow me and check those out. And speaking of things to check out, you might want to check out this video here. It should hold you over to next week when I return with a brand new video. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
You will.